Carnivorous pink cloud. The carnivorous pink cloud is a strange phenomenon reported along the Tomoka River in Daytona, Florida. Descriptions of the cloud characterize it as a mist, low-hanging, and vividly pink or orange in color that has been blamed for unexplained deaths and the discovery of animal carcasses in the surrounding area. More sensational accounts claim that the cloud is actually capable of consuming the flesh of living beings, leaving behind only skeletal remains. The mystery surrounding its origins is often tied to a Native American legend about Chief Tomkey, a figure whose actions are said to have brought about a curse that now lingers in the form of a cloud. According to the legend, Chief Tomkey defied spiritual customs by stealing a sacred golden cup from a revered healing spring, which was an act considered deeply sacrilegious by local tribes. The spring and the ritualistic use of the cup held profound spiritual significance for them, and drinking from it was viewed as an unforgivable transgression. In retaliation, it's said that rival tribes waged an attack on Tomkey and his followers. During the ensuing conflict, a young woman named Olida from one of the opposing tribes managed to shoot Tomkey with an arrow and reclaim the cup. However, she was killed shortly afterward by one of Tomkey's warriors. The tale then concludes with Tomkey's spirit being cursed for his misdeeds, then transforming into the carnivorous pink cloud, doomed to drift through the Tomoka River area as a form of eternal punishment. Taking a look at the background and the history, historical references to the cloud date all the way back to 1605, when Spanish explorer Alvaro Mexia documented encounters with a peculiar mist in the region. Then, over the centuries, residents and visitors have reported eerie discoveries in the vicinity, including the remains of animals and occasionally humans. Some accounts describe the cloud moving in unnatural ways, almost as if it possesses sentience. The idea that the cloud can strip flesh from bones has also become a kinda dark aspect of its reputation, though this lacks concrete evidence. Theories about the phenomenon also range widely. Some suggest the cloud is supernatural in nature, possibly the restless spirit of Chief Tomkey condemned by his own transgressions. Others propose a more scientific explanation, suggesting that toxic gases emitted from the swampy terrain might be responsible for the deaths of animals and potentially humans. Swamp gas, which is a naturally occurring emission known to produce strange sounds and mist in certain conditions, has also been suggested as a possible cause. However, this theory falls short of explaining the more dramatic details of the cloud's alleged behavior. And the Tomoka River region is also home to other unexplained phenomena, which add to the whole mystery. Reports of glowing orbs that appear to follow vehicles on nearby roads are common, though there's no clear link between these sightings and the pink cloud. The broader context of these occurrences has cemented the whole area as a focal point for local legends and speculative lore. But despite years of speculation and storytelling, the true nature of the cloud remains elusive. Tallahassee's Witch Grave. Elizabeth Budd Graham, often called the Witch of Tallahassee, is at the center of a strange story tied to her grave in the Old City Cemetery. Elizabeth, known as Bessie to those close to her, died young in 1889 at just 23 years old from heart disease. She had been married for 2 years to a wealthy cattle rancher, Alexander Graham, and left behind 2 children. At the time of her death, Elizabeth was remembered as a kind and beautiful young woman, admired by many in Tallahassee society. Her grave is marked by a tall granite obelisk surrounded by a low stone wall. This large and expensive monument stands out among the others in the cemetery and reflects the high social standing of her family. While she was seen as a well-loved member of the community when she died, rumors later began to suggest a darker story. Whispers about Elizabeth being a witch started to spread, twisting her image into something more mysterious and dark. One of the details fueling the rumors was the direction her grave faces. Unlike most graves in the cemetery, which face east, Elizabeth's grave actually faces west. Some claim this was a sign of non-Christian burial practices, often linked to witchcraft. In reality, though, graves facing west were uncommon at the time, and one family member explained that Elizabeth simply loved watching sunsets, which could explain the orientation. Still, the unusual positioning added some mystery to her story. The inscription on her grave added even more to the legend. Taken from Edgar Allan Poe's poem Lenore, it reads, "Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever, let the bell toll. A saintly soul floats on the Stygian river. Come let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung. An anthem for the queenliest dead that died so young, a dirge for her the doubly dead, in that she died so young." These lines, meant to mourn a young woman's death, were interpreted by some as proof of witchcraft. References to the Stygian River were also said to connect her to the river Styx from Greek mythology, where spirits are trapped between the living and the dead. The phrase doubly dead was also interpreted to mean that Elizabeth's spirit couldn't fully pass on, as witches were believed to have ties to the world of the living. These interpretations, while dramatic, were not based on any real evidence. They likely arose from gossip and speculation. Some even suggested that Elizabeth was a quote-unquote white witch, using her supposed powers for good, and that she had cast a spell to win the love of her wealthy husband. These claims seem to have been more about envy and storytelling than actual fact. But despite the lack of proof, the legend still grew. Visitors to the cemetery began leaving tokens like coins and shells on her grave, treating it as a site of mystery and supernatural power. Modern Wiccans also sometimes hold ceremonies at the grave, embracing Elizabeth's story as part of their cultural tradition. Then, over time, the grave's unique features, along with Tallahassee's long history and the eerie setting of the cemetery, helped to keep the legend alive. Opened in 1829, this cemetery became the final resting place for people from all walks of life, including soldiers, politicians, and enslaved individuals. The cemetery was also racially segregated, with separate areas for white residents, free people of color, and slaves. Many graves are marked with simple stones or wooden markers that have long since disappeared, leaving the grounds dotted with gaps. The weathered stones, overgrown paths, and old oaks make it a place where stories of hauntings seem to fit naturally. Skunk Ape. The skunk ape, often referred to as Florida's Bigfoot, is a cryptid said to inhabit the dense forests and swamps of the southeastern United States, especially in Florida. The creature is typically described as a large bipedal figure standing between 5 and 7 feet, with reddish-brown fur and a pungent odor that gives it its name. Stories of the skunk ape have actually circulated for centuries, becoming a mix of folklore, alleged sightings, and ongoing debate about its existence. The earliest accounts date all the way back to 1818, when local newspapers in Apalachicola, Florida, reported a man-sized monkey raiding food stores and lurking near fishermen. Later, cryptozoologists speculated that the Seminole and Miccosukee tribes had stories of a foul-smelling, hairy creature they called Esti Kapkaki, which roughly translates to hairy giant. Whether rooted in traditional tales or modern imaginations, sightings of the skunk ape became more frequent as settlers moved into the region. A series of notable encounters has also added to the skunk ape's lore. In 1929, witnesses near the Perky Bat Tower in the Florida Keys reported an ape-like creature shaking the structure, scattering bats into the night. Then, in the 1940s, a man in Suwannee County claimed his car was attacked by a similar figure, which clung to the vehicle and struck it repeatedly as he drove down an isolated road. And around the same time, residents of Bardin, Florida began reporting sightings of a creature they called the Bardin Booger, which became a local legend and something we'll talk about later on. By the 1960s and 1970s, reports of the skunk ape were widespread, with hundreds of sightings documented across Florida. In one instance, 2 Palm Beach County deputies claimed an ape-like creature stalked them through a grove before leaving behind hair and footprints snagged on barbed wire. During the same period, Broward County saw a surge in skunk ape reports, with eyewitnesses describing an ape-like figure that invaded homes, frightened livestock, and even confronted a police officer's vehicle. These sightings gained widespread attention in local and statewide newspapers. Photographic evidence and alleged encounters have also continued in recent decades. In 1997, for example, Everglades tour operator David Shealy reported strange tracks near bait stations he had set up. Guests on wildlife tours also claimed to see the creature. And that same year, Fire Chief Vince Doer photographed a dark figure crossing the swamp, sparking a wave of skunk ape reports in the Big Cypress Natural Preserve. Then, in 2000, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office received anonymous photos, dubbed the Miaka skunk ape, showing what appeared to be a large, hairy figure on the edge of the woods. Despite the widespread interest, skeptics argue that most sightings are misidentifications of Florida black bears, especially those suffering from mange or outright hoaxes. The National Park Service has also dismissed the skunk ape as a product of folklore and imagination. Still, though, the creature has found its place in Florida's cultural landscape, featured in roadside attractions, local businesses, and even promotions like Gatorland's use of the skunk ape to encourage social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Haunted stories from Castillo de San Marcos. The Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine is a structure unlike any other in the United States. Built in 1672 using a rare material called kakina, its unique star-shaped design was intended to withstand assaults from cannon fire, and its walls bear witness to centuries of conflict, imprisonment, and tragedy. Over the years, it's become known not just for its historical significance, but for the strange and unexplained phenomena reported within its walls. One of the most enduring tales connected to the Castillo is that of Osceola, a Seminole leader whose life ended far from his homeland under circumstances that left a scar on history. Captured under a false promise of peace, Osceola and his men were imprisoned in the fort during the Second Seminole War. He was already weakened by illness when he arrived, suffering from chronic ailments that worsened in captivity. Though eventually moved to South Carolina where he passed away, the story of what happened after his death has fueled accounts tied to the Castillo. Dr. Frederick Whedon, a physician who attended to Osceola, was said to have grown close to the chief. But after his death, Whedon did something unthinkable. In a grotesque act that reflected the era's fascination with Native American artifacts, he severed Osceola's head and preserved it in a jar of alcohol. The head was then brought back to St. Augustine and displayed in Whedon's drugstore, reducing a respected leader to just a macabre curiosity. So yeah, visitors to the Castillo today often report sensations that seem to connect to this dark chapter, being shadows that flicker and shift, sudden drops in temperature, and disembodied voices that echo through the halls. Some even have claimed to have seen a headless figure moving silently through the fort, which is said to be a manifestation many believe to be Osceola himself, with his spirit disturbed by the desecration of his body. Another tale rooted in the Castillo's walls is that of the Dolores and Captain Manuel Abella, lovers caught in a tragic affair. Dolores was married to Colonel Garcia Marti, a man more devoted to his duties than to his wife. Isolated and neglected, she found comfort in the attention of the dashing Captain Abella. When the colonel noticed the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the captain's uniform, he put the pieces together and acted swiftly. Both Dolores and the captain vanished, with their absence explained away with vague and suspicious stories. Years later, the remains of 2 people were found chained together in a hidden chamber within the Castillo. The grim discovery confirmed long-held suspicions that the colonel had imprisoned them, leaving them to die in the dark, cold space. Today, visitors to the fort often recount strange experiences, being a lingering floral scent in the air, a sensation of being watched, and an overwhelming sense of sorrow in the quiet corners of the structure. Many believe these signs point to Dolores, with her restless spirit bound to the place where she suffered so greatly. The Castillo has also been a magnet for tales of shadowy figures and unexplained happenings. One such story involves a figure seen pacing the drawbridge, often described as a dark silhouette moving purposefully. Witnesses have observed this figure vanish into thin air, leaving behind an air of mystery that deepens with each retelling. Some say it's a soldier still guarding the fort long after his death, while others speculate it could be tied to the countless prisoners who suffered within its walls. Haunting of Rolling Acres Road. The legend of Julia, known as the White Lady of Rolling Acres Road in Lady Lake, Florida, is one of enduring sorrow and mystery. For decades, her ghostly figure has been reported by locals and travelers alike, said to be a spectral presence haunting the dark stretches of this rural road. Her story, which is rooted in themes of forbidden love and tragic betrayal, has been retold so often that it's become kinda inseparable from the identity of the area. Julia's restless spirit is said to walk the road she once traveled in life, forever bound to the scene of her untimely death. Her image, which is said to be glowing and ethereal, has become a sort of symbol of love's power and the darker forces that sometimes mix with it. As the story goes, she was a young woman caught between her deep love for a man her parents disapproved of and their insistence on an arranged marriage. Trapped by their control, Julia struggled to envision a way out, weighed down by the oppressive traditions of her family. One fateful night, as she returned home along the desolate path lined with wooden planked fences, her mind raced with plans of escape. It was then she saw him, the man she loved, standing beneath a tree in the moonless dark. For a moment, her heart leapt with hope, but that hope was shattered when the quiet of the night exploded with the sound of gunfire. The details of her death vary with each retelling, but the essence remains the same. Julia was killed on that road, her life cut short by the hand of a man consumed by jealousy, obsession, or despair. Some versions claim it was her forbidden lover who pulled the trigger, unable to face life without her. Others, though, suggest a jilted suitor or even a parental scheme gone horribly wrong. What is certain, however, is that Julia's spirit is said to linger on Rolling Acres Road, repeating the final steps of her life in an endless, mournful loop. Her ghostly figure, which is always covered in white, has been described in countless ways, such as walking alongside the road, disappearing into the trees, or simply just standing in the middle of the path, waiting to be passed through. Drivers claim to have seen her glowing form in the distance, only for her to vanish as they approach. Others report more personal encounters, like hearing tapping on their windows after honking their horns, or hearing disembodied voices calling from the surrounding woods. Some have even claimed to hear her cries or even see her ghost, but many warn of car trouble and unexplained engine failures in the area. And one more thing I wanted to add is some speculate that the tragedy of her tale resonates so strongly that it's drawn other restless spirits to the area. Others link her legend to real-life events like unsolved murders and disappearances in nearby areas. Among these is the case of two women, Pamela Natter and Nancy Leichner, who vanished in 1966 while walking in the Alexander Springs Recreation Center. Though their abductions were later attributed to a notorious serial killer, there are whispers that their spirits might also haunt the area, with their cries blending with Julia's on dark moonlit nights. Ghost Light of Greenbriar Road. Greenbriar Road, known to some as Ghost Light Road, stretches through the quiet outskirts of Jacksonville, cutting between Mandarin and Fruit Cove before winding into Switzerland. For decades, it's been more than just a back road for late-night drives. The stories that cling to this stretch of dirt and asphalt have turned it into a rite of passage for thrill seekers and skeptics alike. The tale goes that a young man, no older than 18, lost his life in a motorcycle crash here sometime in the 1950s or 60s. It's said he was speeding down the road, a teenager fueled by adrenaline, when the cable of a telephone pole struck him, decapitating him instantly. They say his restless spirit now still roams the road, with his headlight a beacon that appears behind cars, glowing faintly at first, but growing brighter and closer. Sometimes the light hovers, sometimes it vanishes abruptly, but it never passes. Drivers report watching it fade into the dark trees or seeing it reappear as a red taillight up ahead, racing away. Some say it feels like the light itself is searching for something or someone. One theory claims it's the rider's head, still looking for his body, while others suggest it's the motorcycle's headlight endlessly searching for the missing rider. And over the years, Greenbriar Road has become a destination for curious locals and bored teenagers, many of whom are eager to test their courage. People then watch the rearview mirror for the telltale glow of the ghostly headlight. For some, it's a harmless thrill, but others leave with stories that they can't quite explain. One couple recalls being chased by a blinding white light that stayed behind them no matter how fast they drove. As they sped down the dirt road at 80 miles per hour, they felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the light was more than just a phenomenon, but that it was alive. Not all experiences are as dramatic though, but the consistency of the sightings just kept the legend alive. But while skeptics suggest the light might be nothing more than the beams of cars on nearby County Road 210 refracted through the trees, they admit that the atmosphere on Greenbriar Road feels different. They say there's something about the way the pines loom overhead, the silence pressing in from all sides, and the endless darkness of the road itself that leaves an impression. The Ghost of Flagler College. Henry Flagler's influence on St. Augustine left an unmistakable mark on the city, shaping its transformation from a quiet town to a destination for wealthy travelers in the late 19th century. The Ponce de Leon Hotel, which was his prized creation, is now home to Flagler College. While its history is rich with tales of ambition and innovation, stories of ghostly encounters have persisted, shared among students and visitors alike. The Ponce de Leon Hotel opened in 1888, boasting advanced amenities like electric lighting thanks to Thomas Edison's involvement. It quickly became a retreat for influential figures, including Theodore Roosevelt and Mark Twain. But as Flagler expanded his railroad empire further south, the hotel saw fewer guests, eventually closing its doors in 1967. The following year, the building reopened as Flagler College, repurposed to serve as an academic institution, but carrying with it the weight of its past. Students have passed down stories about unexplained occurrences within the college. One well-known tale describes a woman in black said to silently watch over dorm rooms. Some have even reported seeing her at the foot of their beds or lingering in corners without responding to questions or movements. Another account involves Henry Flagler himself. According to legend, his spirit was trapped in the building after a janitor ignored his instruction to leave windows and doors open during his funeral. Other stories focus on Flagler's personal life, including the spirit of his second wife, Ida Alice. She's often described as staring at his portrait with a look of anguish, a reflection of her struggles with mental illness and her eventual institutionalization. Another story tells of an actress who was allegedly hidden in a room lined with mirrors and later took her own life. This room, once used for contacting spirits, is now said to be avoided because of reports of screams and disturbances. Mysterious Miami Circle. The Miami Circle, discovered in 1998 during a routine excavation in downtown Miami, is an archaeological site carved directly into the limestone bedrock, believed to be about 2,000 years old. Measuring about 38 feet in diameter, the circle contains 24 evenly spaced holes, with some aligned to cardinal directions, and has sparked intense interest because of its unique features and unknown purpose. This discovery has since been linked to the Tequesta, a Native American tribe that lived in the area from around the 3rd century BCE to the 19th century CE. The excavation began as a routine inspection before construction of 2 residential towers at Brickell Point, a waterfront area in downtown Miami. Beneath layers of rubble, archaeologists uncovered artifacts in a series of holes filled with dark midden soil, commonly associated with ancient refuse. As they then cleared the site, the holes revealed a circular pattern, suggesting a structure of cultural importance. Artifacts found at the site included pottery, shell tools, bone implements, and basalt axes, the latter of which originated hundreds of miles away, indicating that the Tequesta were involved in long-distance trade. And this finding actually challenged earlier assumptions that pre-Columbian peoples in the region primarily hunted and fished, instead suggesting they were part of a broader economic network. The function of the Miami Circle still remains uncertain though, with theories ranging from it being a ceremonial site or astronomical calendar to the foundation of a large structure like a council house or a chief's residence. Animal remains, including those of a large shark, and the precise alignment of certain features have led some to speculate it held spiritual or astronomical significance. However, the absence of written records from the Tequesta leaves much of this to interpretation, and the discovery nearly faced destruction as the site was located on private land slated for development. Public support to save the circle quickly grew, with activists, local residents, and school children writing to officials and protesting on site. The Miami Herald, initially in favor of relocating the circle, changed its stance as public sentiment shifted. Efforts included demonstrations, offerings left at the site, and widespread appeals to state and local leaders. Then, after months of legal battles and negotiations, the developer agreed to sell the property for $26.7 million, with funding coming from state and local contributions and a significant loan from the Trust for Public Land. Legendary Wakulla Volcano. Reports of a dark, thick column of smoke rising from the swamps southeast of Tallahassee gave rise to tales of a mysterious volcano in the area not known for volcanic activity. This natural oddity, often referred to as the Wakulla Volcano, seemed to originate near what is now the St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge, especially in a part of southern Jefferson County known as Gum Swamp. Stories of the phenomenon have roots in the region's history, with claims of sightings predating European colonization and possibly existing during Native American occupation. Then, by the late 19th century, the Wakulla volcano had become a popular topic in newspapers and local lore. Explanations for the smoke varied widely, with some attributing it to pirate signals, Civil War deserters communicating with Union blockaders, moonshine operations, or even giant trees struck by lightning. But the phenomenon became less frequent after the 1886 Charleston earthquake, leading some to speculate that the tremors sealed whatever natural event might have been releasing the smoke. And scientific explanations grew more plausible over time, with state librarian W.T. Cash suggesting in the 1930s that the smoke likely came from a smoldering peat fire. Peat, a dense organic material found in marshes, can ignite under the right conditions and burn slowly for extended periods, sometimes emitting thick, dark smoke. While this explanation fits, the sheer longevity and consistency of the smoke remain unusual and challenge simple answers. Further investigations, including an expedition by the National Geographic Institute, have yielded no definitive conclusions. Theories, though, continue to focus on the region's geological and ecological characteristics, especially the abundance of peat and unique karst formations. But despite the lack of concrete evidence for volcanic activity, the nickname Wakulla Volcano persists, which keeps the legend alive. Bardin Booger. The Bardin Booger is a figure in the folklore of Bardin, which is a small unincorporated community in Putnam County, Florida. This creature, which is described in various ways over the decades, has been the focus of countless stories, sightings, and local traditions. Bardin, located west of US 17 and nestled in a pine-covered landscape of Florida 100, is home to just over 400 residents. Its quiet, rural atmosphere has provided fertile ground for tales of the booger to grow and persist since at least the 1940s. One of the earliest recorded encounters occurred in the spring of 1947 when a woman riding her horse near Bardin claimed to see what she initially thought was a very tall man in a long raincoat. On closer inspection though, she realized that the so-called coat was actually just fur and the figure wasn't human at all. This sighting set the tone for future reports, with descriptions of the creature varying widely. Some say the booger resembles a skunk ape or Bigfoot, while others suggest it may be a descendant of an escaped circus monkey that grew to an unusual size in the wilds of Florida. Sightings of the Bardin Booger have also been often inconsistent in details, which only adds to the mystery. Some witnesses described it as more human-like, while others reported it as a massive animalistic figure. In several accounts, the booger is also said to emit a foul stench so overpowering that it incapacitated one man who tried to aim his rifle at the creature. Another common feature in these stories is the booger's apparent fondness for carrying a lantern and its preference for spending time near the local creek. One especially unusual sighting occurred in 1981 near the Atonia Baptist Church. According to a man named B.J. Glisson, he and a companion were waiting for his brother on a bright moonlit night when they saw something moving in a nearby cypress pond. Glisson described hearing mumbling noises but couldn't make out any words. The creature they spotted also had no visible legs and made no sound as it moved through the water. While the details remain vague, the account is often cited as one of the more compelling Bardin Booger stories. The creature's antics have also become kinda a source of humor and community spirit in Bardin. Residents recall tales of the booger stealing clothes from clotheslines, raiding refrigerators, and even appearing with a lantern at local festivals. At Palatka's Azalea Festival in 2006, the booger was reportedly seen carrying an American flag and a bouquet of azaleas. And local businesses and residents have also embraced the booger as a symbol of their community. Bud's Grocery, a popular gathering spot in Bardin, was once known for selling booger-themed merchandise, including t-shirts and hats for those curious about the creature. Longtime residents Lena and Billy Crane kept the booger story alive by dressing up in a homemade costume for special events. Billy would perform a song about the Bardin Booger while Lena played the part of the creature itself. And even after Billy's passing, Lena continues to share the booger story with locals and visitors, ensuring that the creature is remembered as a fun and unthreatening part of Bardin's history. I-4 Road. The I-4 Dead Zone is a stretch of Florida highway that has some eerie stories and strange occurrences that are tied to it. This quarter-mile portion of Interstate 4 near the St. Johns River has a dark past tied to a failed settlement and the graves of those who perished in a devastating yellow fever outbreak in 1887. Despite its outwardly ordinary appearance, those who know its history speak of unexplained accidents, ghostly voices, and a lingering sense of dread surrounding this patch of road. The land's history traces back to the late 19th century when Henry Sanford, a land developer, sold parcels along the southern shore of Lake Monroe to incoming settlers. Among them was a small group of German Catholic immigrants who established St. Joseph Catholic Colony. Led by Father Felix Swemberg, this effort to tame the Florida wilderness began with promise but ended in tragedy. The colony was short-lived, with only 4 families settling before a yellow fever outbreak struck in 1887, claiming the lives of 4 members of one family. Fearing the disease's spread, survivors buried the dead hastily in unmarked graves near the railroad. Father Swemberg, called to perform last rites, died of the fever shortly after, and the precise locations of the graves were lost. The land then remained quiet until the mid-20th century when Florida purchased it for the construction of Interstate 4. Any plans to relocate the graves were now abandoned, and the highway was built directly over the burial site. Almost immediately, odd events began to unfold. Hurricane Donna, a powerful storm in 1960, took an unusual path that seemed to target the area, stalling construction for months. Decades later, Hurricane Charlie mirrored Donna's path, with its eye passing directly over the gravesite during construction. These storms added to the belief that disturbing the graves had unleashed some kind of curse. Reports of unusual activity continue to this day. Drivers claim their cell phone conversations are interrupted by ghostly voices when passing the area. Others describe their electronic devices malfunctioning, strange balls of lights hovering above the road, and creepy encounters with shadowy figures or phantom hitchhikers. The dead zone's reputation is further fueled by the high number of fatal car accidents occurring on this stretch of highway. The first incident, involving a truck carrying frozen shrimp, happened the day the interstate opened and kinda set the tone for the area's grim legacy. Locals tied these occurrences to the unrest of the buried settlers whose graves were desecrated. Whether these strange events are real or imagined though, the dead zone's reputation keeps it firmly in the realm of Florida's haunted folklore. Travelers passing through are advised to drive cautiously, as some believe the spirits beneath the asphalt may still be watching. St. Francis Inn. The St. Francis Inn in St. Augustine is deeply tied to tales of lingering spirits and unexplained occurrences, which makes it one of the most discussed haunted locations in a city known for its long and often turbulent history. Among these stories, one that stands out is the tale of Lily and her ill-fated romance. For decades, accounts of ghostly figures, mischievous pranks, and eerie phenomena have been linked to this 18th century inn, especially a room now known as Lily's Room. The story of Lily begins in the mid-19th century when William Joseph Hardy, a stern and authoritative figure, managed the inn. His young nephew, in stark contrast to his uncle, was described as romantic and idealistic. The nephew fell deeply in love with Lily, a servant at the inn. By all accounts, Lily was a woman of striking presence, believed to have been of Barbadian descent. Their secret relationship, carried out in the shadows of the inn's many rooms, was doomed from the start. At a time when interracial relationships were not only taboo but dangerous, the lovers knew the affair had to remain hidden. Their fragile secrecy came to an abrupt and devastating end when Hardy discovered them. Accounts differ on what happened next. Some say Lily was dismissed from the inn, sent away to an unknown fate. Others suggest her end was far grimmer, with stories hinting at violence in the wake of Hardy's fury. The nephew, shattered by the loss and unable to cope with his grief, is said to have taken his own life in what is now Lily's room. Whether he hanged himself or leapt from the third-floor window, his tragic demise marked the beginning of what many believe is a haunting that still persists to this day. The stories of paranormal activity tied to Lily and her lover have been numerous and varied. Guests and staff alike have reported encounters that defy any explanation. Many describe seeing a woman dressed in white moving quietly through the hallways. And in Lily's room in particular, guests have experienced objects being moved, lights turning on and off, and an overall sense of an unseen presence. One housekeeper even recounted how a television repeatedly turned itself off while she was cleaning, forcing her to abandon the task altogether. Other incidents have been more disturbing. A guest once awoke to the sound of a loud thud, discovering her purse had been thrown across the room. Another guest found their cosmetic bag inexplicably filled with water, though nothing else in the room was wet. A male guest even woke to find himself under the bed, unable to explain how he had ended up there. Some visitors have also reported the sensation of being kissed or touched by an unseen entity, while others have heard whispers or felt icy hands on the stair railings. Lily's room in particular is a focal point for these strange events. Both Lily and her lover are believed to haunt the inn together, with their restless spirits searching for each other but seemingly never able to reunite. Psychics who have visited the inn suggest the couple's tragic separation in life has trapped them in an eternal state of longing. Beyond Lily's story though, other apparitions as well have been observed at the inn, including an older man dressed in period clothing and a Hispanic man pacing between rooms. These figures, often unaware of those around them, add to the sense that the inn is a crossroads of past lives. Despite the eerie happenings though, many guests and employees describe the spirits of the St. Francis Inn as harmless, even playful. The ghosts seem more interested in making their presence known than actually causing harm. But for those interested by the supernatural still, the inn offers an opportunity to experience a slice of history that feels alive in a very literal sense. Bloody Bucket Road. This tale centers on a midwife's fall from grace and the haunting aftermath of her alleged actions. It's a story rooted in the area's history, revealing not only the superstitions of a post-Civil War Florida town, but also the way legends transform over time. The legend begins with a freed slave woman, often unnamed but sometimes referred to as Ludmilla Clark or Mary, who moved to the area after the Civil War. She worked as a midwife, a respected yet challenging role in an era when infant mortality was heartbreakingly common. Initially, her work was celebrated, but as time passed, rumors began to circulate about her deliveries. Families began noticing an alarming number of stillbirths under her care, and whispers of suspicion grew louder. The reasons behind her actions, as told in various versions of the tale, kind of vary. Some say she was driven mad by the loss of her own children during her enslavement, either through death or the horrors of forced separation. Others claim that she believed she was helping impoverished families by sparing them the burden of raising additional children. Regardless of the motive though, the legend paints a grim picture, being the midwife smothering newborns, telling the grieving families they were stillborn, and then disposing of the tiny bodies in secret. It's said that she carried the remains, along with buckets of blood and fluids from the births, to the bridge now known as Bloody Bucket Bridge. There, under the cover of darkness, she would bury the bodies along the riverbank and pour the blood-stained water into the river. Her actions, so the story goes, turned the water red, though only she could see it at first. Over time, then, her crimes caught up with her, whether through guilt, supernatural torment, or the suspicions of the community. Villagers began to distance themselves from her services, and she descended into madness. Haunted by the cries of the infants she had delivered to their untimely deaths, the midwife's life unraveled. She was reportedly seen wandering the swamps, muttering incoherently and carrying her bucket, which she claimed was eternally filling itself with blood. Her obsession with emptying the bucket then became a sort of ritual, and she was said to return to the bridge time and again, dumping the contents into the river only for it to refill moments later. The tale then ends with the midwife's death, though the details remain inconsistent. Some say she fell into the river while performing her morbid ritual, while others suggest she actually took her own life, unable to endure the guilt and torment any longer. On the night of her death, it's said the river turned crimson and remained so for days. But the thing is, the legend didn't fade away with her death. Instead, it took on a new life of its own, becoming a story that locals still share, especially on nights of the full moon. According to the tale, the river beneath the bridge turns red during these nights, and the cries of phantom infants can be heard echoing through the darkness. Empty buckets left by the water's edge are also said to mysteriously fill with bloody water, as if cursed to replay the midwife's actions. Skeptics have also pointed to more mundane explanations for the bridge's eerie reputation. Some believe the name Bloody Bucket originally referred to a bar located nearby, infamous for its violent patrons and the blood-stained water used to mop up after nightly brawls. Others suggest the story gained traction through embellishments and retellings, transforming into a whole ghost story over time. But despite efforts to dispel the myth, the legend still persists. Visitors drawn to the bridge often report strange phenomena still, being phantom voices, unexplained splashing sounds, and even the sensation of being watched. While some come seeking thrills, others find themselves deeply creeped out by the whole experience, which all adds to the lore surrounding the bridge. The Legend of Spook Hill. So the Spook Hill in Lake Wales, Florida is known as a gravity hill and is a place where cars in neutral appear to roll uphill. Researchers Paola Bresson, Luigi Garlasielli, and Monica Baracano have studied this type of optical illusion and describe it as a naturally occurring phenomenon. The effect happens on slightly sloping roads where the horizon is obscured, causing the brain to misinterpret the incline. At Spook Hill, a large sloping hill hides the horizon, which creates this whole illusion. Visitors are encouraged to stop at a marked spot and let their car roll in neutral to witness this strange effect. Although there are nearby structures like Spook Hill Elementary School and residential areas, the view from the hill mostly includes trees and just open sky, which adds to the illusion. The hill gained popularity as a tourist attraction around 1950, during a time when car travel became central to recreation in the United States. Spook Hill then became a convenient stop for road trippers, and it ended up being advertised really heavily through signage, brochures, and even a local play. These efforts turned the site into a well-known destination by tying it to folklore and regional history. Stories about Spook Hill added to the whole history, including a tale of a pirate named Captain Sarsaparilla said to push cars up the hill, and another about a giant alligator spirit inhabiting the area. These legends, though unverifiable, contributed to the site's appeal and helped establish connections between Spook Hill and other local attractions, which helped it strengthen its role in the mid-century tourism through cross-promotion and advertising. And the legend of Spook Hill also inspired a poem by Arthur Franklin Mapes, which tells a darker tale of betrayal and revenge. The poem recounts the story of a man falsely accused of murder and theft, executed after being framed by a rival who coveted his land. Before his death, the man vowed to take revenge, and the legend suggests that unexplained events soon followed, including phantom fires and horses breaking free on their own. Over time, the property was abandoned though, and the man who orchestrated the betrayal vanished, leaving the site shrouded in mystery. And according to the poem, the winds on the hill still echo with the accused man's final warning. Lake Okeechobee's water graves. For decades, Lake Okeechobee in Florida has harbored a mystery that still continues to puzzle historians, archaeologists, and local researchers. Prior to 1910, settlers and fishermen around the lake began reporting some really strange discoveries. Along the southern shallows, human remains were occasionally caught in fishing nets or spotted scattered across the lakebed. One account even described the remains as so numerous that during periods of low water, the lakebed resembled a pumpkin patch of skulls and bones. Then, in the early 1900s on Grassy Island, over 50 skeletons were uncovered beneath mere inches of sand. This area, which was previously submerged, had become accessible after drainage canals lowered the lake's water levels. Similarly, in 1953, a fisherman recounted finding multiple skulls and scattered bones in the mud around Observation Island. But the extent of the remains became more apparent during significant drops in water levels, like in 1918. And around Rita and Creamer Islands, hundreds of skeletons, including those of adults and children, were unearthed from the silt. These discoveries span vast areas and displayed no clear pattern or alignment, with no accompanying artifacts to suggest cultural or ceremonial intent. The sheer volume of remains presented a whole mystery that defied simple explanation and left their origins shrouded in uncertainty. One early theory, though, suggested that the remains were victims of ancient hurricanes, a plausible idea considering South Florida's history of violent storms. However, major hurricanes like those in 1926 and 1928 resulted in casualties that were documented, recovered, and buried on the mainland. Also, the thing is, the sparse population around Lake Okeechobee before the 20th century makes it unlikely that earlier storms could account for the thousands of skeletons uncovered. Another hypothesis pointed to historical conflict, specifically the 1837 Battle of Okeechobee during the Seminole Wars. Yet, even this engagement resulted in only about 30 recorded deaths, which was a number far too small to explain the vast quantity of remains that were found. The possibility that the skeletons predate European colonization has also been explored, with speculation about links to ancient indigenous populations. Epidemics, tribal warfare, or ritualistic practices have all been proposed as potential causes. However, the absence of pottery, tools, or burial markers kind of complicate these theories, leaving anthropologists and historians without definitive evidence. But one especially interesting idea I wanted to point out is that the lake served as an underwater burial site for an ancient culture that we don't really know. The thing is, some indigenous groups are known to have practiced such burials by the way of anchoring bodies to the bottom of the lakes. While this could account for some of the remains, it doesn't really explain their scattered and disorganized distribution, nor the lack of cultural artifacts that would typically accompany such practices. But local folklore has also added another dimension to the whole mystery. One story claims that in 1841, about 200 Seminoles facing capture by US forces took their own lives by slitting their throats and casting themselves into the lake. This tale, however, while haunting, lacks historical evidence and offers little in terms of a credible link to the skeletal remains. And according to some versions of the legend, a Seminole medicine man cursed the lake, a supposed curse of the Everglades that has since been connected to unrelated tragedies, including the crashes of 2 planes in the area decades later. However, tribal representatives have dismissed such stories as unfounded myths. Speculation has also ventured into the more fantastical. Some have suggested that the skeletons could belong to a lost tribe or even refugees from the mythical Atlantis. Others have proposed extraterrestrial involvement, an idea that, while unsupported, reflects the whole allure of an unsolved mystery. But yeah, overall, despite years of research and countless theory, the mystery of the lake's skeletal remains still remains unsolved. Captain Tony's Saloon. Captain Tony's Saloon in Key West, Florida is a building with a long and complex history that spans over a century. Originally constructed in the 19th century, the building has served multiple purposes. It's functioned as a morgue, an ice house, a telegraph station, a cigar factory, a bordello, and a speakeasy. Before becoming Captain Tony's Saloon, it was the original location of Sloppy Joe's Bar, frequented by Ernest Hemingway. The building's dark past includes associations with death, public executions, and just tragic events, many of which contribute to the ghost stories that surround it today. But yeah, basically, the saloon stands on a site which was once used as a public execution ground. A large tree on the property, which is still visible inside the building, served as the hanging tree where an estimated 75 to 85 people were executed for crimes like murder and piracy. During renovations in the 1980s then, workers uncovered human remains beneath the floorboards. About 20 skeletons ended up being discovered along with grave markers. One gravestone belonged to a woman named Elvira Drew, who was reportedly hanged at the age of 19 for killing her abusive husband. Another gravestone found beneath the floor belonged to Reba Sawyer, whose husband allegedly buried her body there after discovering love letters between her and another man. These discoveries have been cited as potential reasons for the hauntings reported at the saloon. One of the most well-known stories involves the Lady in Blue. According to the legend, she was hanged on the tree inside the building after killing her husband and 2 children. She was reportedly executed in the same blood-stained blue dress she wore during her murders. Witnesses have claimed to see her ghost wandering the saloon, especially near the tree, and some say her presence is creepy enough to cause patrons to leave the bar entirely. Another prominent story involves a young woman from the Speakeasy era. She reportedly entered the building searching for her husband, whom she found drunk and with another woman. In a fit of rage, she killed her infant child in the restroom before fleeing. Her ghost is now said to haunt the woman's restroom, with visitors frequently reporting unexplained phenomena like doors locking and unlocking on their own, disembodied voices, and sudden cold spots. One account even involves a bar patron who attempted to climb the hanging tree inside the saloon. Upon touching it, however, he experienced severe burns on his hands that required medical attention. This incident is often cited as evidence of the tree's lingering connection to the executions that took place there. The saloon's owner, Joe Farber, initially skeptical of these ghost stories, has reported his own unexplained experiences as well. On 2 occasions, he heard a voice calling his name late at night while he was alone at the bar. The first time, he found the back doors open despite having locked them earlier. The second time, the voice urged him not to leave. That same night, a young woman died by taking her own life outside the saloon. Farber believes the voice was warning him to stay, potentially to prevent the tragedy. Sunshine Skyway Ghost. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Tampa Bay, Florida, spans the lower Tampa Bay, connecting to St. Petersburg to Tallahassee. The current bridge, officially named the Bob Graham Sunshine Skyway Bridge, replaced the original structure after a catastrophic collapse in 1980. Its history includes engineering developments, a major disaster, and numerous reports of unexplained phenomena. The original bridge, constructed by the Virginia Bridge Company, opened in 1954 as a 2-lane structure. Then, in 1969, a parallel bridge was built to add 2 more lanes and meet updated highway standards. Before its opening in 1971, a crack was even discovered in the southern main pier because of insufficient depth of the supporting pile, which delayed its use. Despite the upgrade, disaster struck less than a decade later. On May 9, 1980, the freighter MV Summit Venture collided with the Sunshine Skyway Bridge during severe weather conditions. Heavy rain and strong winds reduced visibility and rendered the ship's radar ineffective. The vessel's captain attempted to avoid the bridge by reversing engines and deploying an emergency anchor, but the freighter struck 2 support piers, causing a section of the bridge to collapse. Then, more than 1,200 feet of the structure plunged into Tampa Bay, taking 6 cars, a Greyhound bus, and a pickup truck with it. Wesley McIntyre, the driver of the pickup truck, survived by landing on the freighter's hull before his vehicle ricocheted into the water. He witnessed 6 vehicles, including the bus, fall into the bay, which ended up claiming 35 lives. McIntyre, the sole survivor, later drove over the bridge's remnants and dropped 35 carnations into the water to honor the victims. In the aftermath, Florida Governor Bob Graham initiated the construction of a new bridge with reinforced design elements, including a wider main span and protective barriers known as dolphins to shield the piers from ship collisions. It was then that the new Sunshine Skyway Bridge opened in 1987. Reports of paranormal activity have surrounded the bridge since its collapse. Many claim that the spirits of those who perished still remain tied to the area. Drivers have recounted seeing a phantom Greyhound bus floating in the bay, dripping water, with ghostly figures visible through the windows. Some describe even seeing apparitions of a woman emerging from the bus, waving before vanishing. Wesley McIntyre also reported recurring dreams of a young girl underwater, silent and distressed. He described waking up to find her apparition standing beside his bed, leaving behind no evidence other than water pooled on the floor. Beyond the 1980 disaster, though, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge has been the site of tragedy for other reasons as well. Since its original construction, over 300 individuals have ended their lives by jumping from the bridge. In 1999, even 6 crisis hotline phones and 24-hour patrols were introduced, resulting in some lives being saved. Despite these measures, though, incidents continue to occur. Reports of spectral figures near the edges of the bridge have been linked to its history of people taking their own lives, with some witnesses claiming these figures vanish when approached. New Smyrna's mysterious ruins. The Turnbull ruins in New Smyrna Beach stand as a weathered, mysterious reminder of Florida's past. Situated near the intracoastal waterway, the Coquina remains, which are a mixture of shell fragments and sedimentary rock, have long been shrouded in mystery. Though the structure's exact origins remain uncertain, its history is layered with stories of ambition, hardship, and survival. Most historians attribute the ruins to Dr. Andrew Turnbull, a Scottish physician who arrived in Florida in 1768 under British rule. With him came nearly 1,500 settlers, including Greeks, Corsicans, Italians, and Minorcans. These settlers were brought to establish a plantation for crops such as indigo, sugarcane, and hemp. However, they faced unimaginable challenges, including food shortages, relentless heat, mosquito-borne illnesses, grueling labor, and frequent conflicts with Native Americans. Then, within 9 years, the colony was abandoned, leaving behind the Coquina structure many believe was meant to be Turnbull's mansion. After the settlers fled to St. Augustine, Turnbull left Florida and moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Some historians argue that the ruins predate Turnbull's time in Florida. The structure's fortified appearance, including its butt-rested walls, suggest a defensive purpose, leading some to theorize it may have been a Spanish-built fort. Others speculate it could have served as a colonial church or even a warehouse for goods transported via the nearby wharf. The lack of definitive records about its original purpose, though, has only deepened the mystery. What is certain, though, is that the ruins have witnessed significant historical upheaval. After Turnbull's departure, Dr. Ambrose Hall, a Connecticut settler, attempted to establish a cotton and sugar plantation in the area in 1801. His plans were disrupted, though, by Native American attacks, though he later rebuilt and named the area Mount Olive. Hull's home, constructed atop the ruins, was then destroyed in 1812 during the Patriots' War. The ruins also played a role in Florida's turbulent sugar trade. In the 1830s, Thomas Stamps attempted to establish a large sugar plantation at the site, but the Seminole Indians burned it to the ground in 1835. Then, decades later, in 1854, John D. Sheldon built a 40-room hotel over the ruins. The hotel ended up being destroyed during the Civil War in 1863 when Union ships shelled the town. Sheldon, though, rebuilt the hotel in 1867 using salvaged materials, though this structure was eventually torn down in 1896. Today, the Turnbull ruins are part of Old Fort Park, offering a sort of glimpse into New Smyrna's complex history. Haunting story of the Fairchild Oak. The Fairchild Oak, a massive live oak tree over 400 years old, stands quietly in Buller Creek State Park near Ormond Beach, Florida. Towering and serene, it's weathered centuries of history, including the destruction of the neighboring Buller plantation during the Second Seminole War in 1836. Yet, for all its enduring beauty, the tree is also linked to some disturbing tales that linger in the local imagination. The first of these stories involves James Ormond II, a man whose home was near the tree. His body was later discovered beneath its sprawling branches, and to this day, no one knows exactly how he died. Decades later, around 1880, the land's owner, Norman Harwood, reportedly took his own life under the same tree. Harwood, described as a towering figure in both stature and personality, had fallen into insurmountable depth. Whether it was financial despair or something more intangible that led him to his tragic end, the details remain murky. Despite its grim associations, though, the area around the Fairchild Oak is now a peaceful spot. Visitors come to picnic under nearby pavilions or stroll along the scenic Buller Woods Trail, a 7-mile pathway that winds through the park and connects to the Buller Plantation Ruins Historic State Park. And along the way, wildlife sightings are common, being deer, raccoons, barred owls, and a variety of birds. Still, some claim to see more than just the local fauna. Visitors have reported glimpses of a man near the tree, with his presence accompanied by an unshakable feeling of sorrow. Magnolia Creek Lane. Magnolia Creek Lane, which is a narrow road several miles from Montverde on the west side of Lake Apopka, weaves through a wooded area that once felt remote and mysterious. Though modern homes have crept closer to its edges, the lane is still spoken of in hushed tones by locals who share eerie stories about its haunted past. The legend that lingers over this road is rooted in a supposed 19th century train wreck. It's said that a massive collision along the old railroad tracks have claimed the lives of 200 passengers, and that their spirits now haunt the woods. While there's no historical records of such a disaster though, nor evidence that passenger trains operated in the area, the absence of facts hasn't dimmed the stories. Locals swear the woods echo with strange noises, being disembodied screams that seem to drift farther away when pursued, or the faint sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush. Shadowy figures are also said to walk the road at night, vanishing as quickly as they appear. Visitors often link the road's ghostly atmosphere to its past as a railroad bed, with remnants of the tracks still visible in older maps. Some insist that on quiet nights, the screams heard near the creek are those of the ill-fated train crew. Others believe the sounds might simply be carried across the water from a distance, with their origins entirely natural. Yet, for those who ventured down Magnolia Creek Lane after dark, the explanations don't seem to matter as much as the feeling of unease that lingers. One story tells of a pair of friends who braved the woods at night. They followed the sounds of what seemed like distant cries, only to find that the noise always stayed just out of reach. Another recalls eerie shadows seen moving along the road, shapes resembling people but fading like mist when approached. Despite its sinister reputation though, the road still attracts those drawn to the thrill of the unknown. It's a place where local legends have come alive, where even the most rational visitors might find themselves glancing over their shoulders or straining to listen for footsteps behind them. Catalina's Ghost. The building at 46 Avenida Menendez, now housing Harry's Seafood Bar and Grilly in St. Augustine, Florida, has a long history dating back to the 18th century. Originally constructed around 1745, the structure was built from tabby, a mixture of burnt oyster shells, sand, and ash that created a concrete-like material commonly used during that period. It was initially a family home for Juana Navarro and Salvador Francisco de Porras and their 9 children, including their youngest daughter, Catalina. Catalina became a key figure in the building's history and the ghostly stories that surround it. In 1768, when the Spanish ceded St. Augustine to the British, the de Porras family left for Cuba. After the Spanish regained control of East Florida in 1783, Catalina and her husband, Xavier Ponce de Leon, returned to St. Augustine to reclaim her childhood home. They found the city now in disrepair, and their house had been converted into a storage barn by the British. By 1789, the couple successfully petitioned the Spanish governor to reinstate the property to their name. However, Catalina's time in the restored home was brief, as she passed away in 1795. Then, over the years, the building has undergone significant changes. In 1887, a fire devastated much of St. Augustine, including the house. It was then rebuilt in 1888 using more modern materials like concrete, but maintained the original design and foundation. The structure has since been repurposed multiple times, including its current use as a restaurant. Catalina's ghost is one of the most frequently reported apparitions associated with the site. She's often seen in what some described as a white gown, gliding across the second-floor dining area or walking through walls and closed doors. Her presence is sometimes accompanied by a distinct floral scent, which patrons and staff have noticed even amidst the restaurant's usual aromas. And the second-floor restroom, which was once Catalina's bedroom, is a common location for sightings. One account describes 2 women taunting her spirit in the restroom, only to experience unexplainable phenomena later, like faucets turning on by themselves and really hot water spewing unexpectedly. Another tragic figure tied to the building is Bridget Berry, an enslaved woman who lost her life in the 1887 fire. According to local stories, she ran back into the burning structure to retrieve her belongings but was unable to escape. Patrons and employees have reported smelling smoke or burnt fabric in the restaurant, often accompanied by an intense feeling of unease. These occurrences are believed to be tied to Bridget's final desperate moments. Despite its haunted reputation, though, the restaurant still remains a popular dining spot, with visitors often curious about its ghostly history. Some guests come specifically to experience the paranormal stuff, while others encounter the unexplained during an otherwise ordinary meal. The Legend of the Devil's Millhopper. The Devil's Millhopper in Gainesville, Florida, is a fascinating place with history and folklore tied to its deep, round sinkhole. This spot, which is a National Natural Landmark and state park, is known for its natural springs, cooler temperatures at the bottom, and its role as a window into Florida's past. Researchers have found all sorts of things like fossils, shark teeth, and even prehistoric human remains in the sinkhole, but it's the myths surrounding the site that make it even more interesting. The name Devil's Millhopper actually originates from its shape, which resembles the hopper used by millers to funnel grain into a mill. Local folklore, however, offers a more dark explanation. According to one tale, the sinkhole serves as a portal to the devil himself, where unfortunate victims were supposedly fed to him. This story likely emerged after bones were discovered at the site, coupled with the sinkhole's haunting appearance and the mysterious springs that seemed to bubble up from nowhere. And among the legends tied to the Devil's Millhopper is one with roots in the Timqua people, which were the indigenous inhabitants of the region. The story basically tells of a beautiful princess who caught the eye of the devil. When she spurned his advances, he kidnapped her and retreated to the sinkhole. Warriors from a tribe then pursued them, only to fall victim to the sinkhole's quicksand. Some versions of the tale claim that the devil himself created the sinkhole as a trap, while others say he devoured the warriors and spat out their bones, leaving them to scatter across the site. The springs following through the sinkhole are also said to represent the tears of the grieving warriors, mourning the loss of their princess.